Hey guys, welcome back to our series, How Do I? My name is Clayton. I'm the lead pastor of Trinity New Life Church. And if you're anything like me, almost all of your searches start with that phrase, how do I? So we collected a bunch of questions that people had along those lines, and we're trying to answer them from a Christian perspective and a Christian worldview. So here is the next question that we're going to try to answer. How do I know God's will in a specific situation? I think this is such an important question to ask. And so if you've ever had this question, I just want to let you know you are not alone. I've had this question. I've had to figure this out. And so here's what I've learned in this circumstance. And the first thing I want to talk about is we said God's will, meaning what does he want? And I think sometimes we can get a little locked in is that there is one particular way. There's just one choice only in a circumstance, and that's his will. And if we miss it, we make him mad. Let's talk about two different things. Let's talk about God's perfect will and God's permissible will. I think of God's permissible will like the banks of a river, and God will not let us escape from those things. We can't leave his permissible will. So that doesn't mean that everything that happens, God causes to happen, but I do believe that everything that happens, God has allowed to happen. He gives humanity freedom within boundary. And so within his permissible will, I believe there's a perfect will that we can be following. If you've ever been on a river, if you've ever been tubing or whitewater rafting, you know that as you go down, there's a way that is way smoother, or there's a way where you are bouncing back and forth between every rock and branch and edge. You get down the river, but it is not the most enjoyable way. We want to try to find as much as possible his perfect will to be able to have the smoothest trip down the river. But if you bump into something, you get out of your tube for a second, you hit the river, you hit the sides of the wall, don't feel like you're failing and broken. Just get back in and keep following God. So how do I try to best find his perfect will inside of his permissible will? Again, great question. First, I don't know how to get away from this. I know it's a topic in a lot of our videos. The better you know the Bible, the better you know his scriptures, the easier it's going to be to answer that question. Here's the other thing. The closer you are to God, because I think it's possible to know the words, know some of the verses, but not know the person who's saying them. We all live in an Instagram celebrity culture where we know a lot of stuff about people that we don't actually know. And that can be like that with God too. We can know a lot about him, but not know him. So the closer your relationship with him is, the more you're spending time with him, speaking to him, praying to him, serving him, listening to his voice, the easier it's going to be to answer these questions. Just like any friend or relationship, the more time you spend around them, the easier it is for you to make assumptions about what they like and don't like, want and don't want. So the next thing we're going to try to figure out is, when it comes to God's will, is there a clear yes, I should do this? You do not have to have an angel from heaven come down and hand you a tablet or see a sign on the side of the street for you to think, should I go and make disciples? Should I try to reach out to someone or invite them to grow in their faith? We know from the scriptures that God's will is always for that to take place. So we don't have to pray about that. There's a clear yes. Then sometimes there is a clear no. Is God wanting me to have multiple wives? No, he is not. He's not wanting you to have multiple husbands. He probably doesn't even want you to have multiple people's Netflix password, okay? But that's a different circumstance in a different video. So sometimes there's a very clear yes and a very clear no where we don't have to wonder from the scriptures. Then we can pray about it. If there isn't a clear yes and isn't a clear no, let's pray. And sometimes God will speak very clearly to our spirit, yes or no. So there's the answer. So number one, what does the word say? Number two, have you prayed about it and asked God, what His will is, or are you just asking other people what His will is? And then if you don't have a clear answer from the scriptures, yes or no, and if you prayed about it and you don't have a clear yes or no, maybe there's freedom. There's freedom inside of that to be able to make disciples, but to do so in Boston, to do so in California. Maybe the where isn't important or as very specific, but maybe what you're doing is the most important thing. So that's a real quick primer on how do I find and how do I know what God's will is in a specific circumstance. Look to the scriptures. Do they give a specific yes or no? Pray about it. Is there a specific yes or no? And if there isn't, trust your friends, talk to them, ask your spiritual leaders, and maybe there's freedom for you to be able to make that decision because it's within the boundaries of His permissible will. All right, that's our video for today. Hey, 2 things before you go. Make sure you have liked this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel so you don't miss any other content from us. The second, I'd love for you to comment below any questions that you have. What's your how do I? And maybe you'll see that as a video soon. Thanks so much.